Well, we recently finished a series called How Then Shall We Live? And Tom, you came in a little late to this, but Sandra was supposed to, and myself were supposed to go through these today and talk about kind of a recap of all the different questions that we addressed. And so I know each and every one of you personally, I know that you have some wonderful thoughts and beautiful minds. So we're just going to talk a little bit about this. You know, the human being, of all the life species on Earth, is the most elevated. Human beings are the only ones that can think into the future and plan for something. They're the only ones that can recall vivid things from the past. We build buildings that are skyscrapers. We travel 1,000 miles an hour in the air. We walk in the moon. We harness electricity. We've done all these things. And yet somehow we don't seem to be attuned to nature like the rest of nature. We still have a hard time determining how we should live. And as a result, we as a human species have more conflicts, we have more needless deaths, and we have more poverty than all the rest of the species together. So the first question that we're addressing here is, who am I? And that's a difficult one, because each and every one of us, we are the person that we've been told we are from the very time we're little. If you're female or male, you're told what that means and how you're supposed to be. If you grow up in a political family that's Republican or Democrat, you're told that you're Republican or Democrat. So we get to a point on the spiritual path where we don't really know who we are. All we know is what everybody has told us along the way, whether it's social groups or family or the culture that we live in. So, Linda, I'll start with you. Who are you?
Well, thank you for inviting me up. That's a good question, and I would like to state that everything you mentioned is true. And as a seminarian that completed a master's in theology as an ordained minister, after completing those things, I realized that I really didn't know who I was. And so I had to abandon those things in a way that I'm on a path that allows me to envelope the things that I've learned with the things of the teachings that I was raised with, outing those things that do me no good, that causes me to do more harm to myself because I could never measure up. And being able each day, just taking each day to appreciate the beauties that come into my life and being able to welcome those things that are uncomfortable, but yet being able to hear it out, to see how does this play a role in my life today, and is it something that will help me to better spread love to others. And sometimes those things are very, very hard to interpret and to just digest. And the word that has stuck with me in the last week is tender. Being not only tender with myself, but tender with others.
You know, I think that's a good point. We all have that inner critic, but the critic doesn't have to be harsh. And I think you hit the spot right on target, and that be tender with ourselves, be kind to ourselves, treat ourselves like we would treat a small child or something, and always be totally loving, and recognize that there's nothing wrong with any of us. You know, we have certain characteristics that we don't particularly like about ourselves. We have certain habits that we don't like, that we're engaged with, but we're all on the spiritual path. We're all evolving through this lifetime. And everything about us, all of what we call flaws, are just perfectly natural. They're not flaws at all. It's just where the human beings are at this particular stage of evolution. Ace, do you have something to say?
I do really well seeing the flaws of others, however, just for the record.
You do?
Oh yeah, that's one of my gifts.
Well, when you're flawless, other people's flaws,
Yeah.
I get that.
But not yours, Duke, because you have so few. And you do know I admire you, I hope. And I hope you recognize that I admire the transition that you went through many years ago. both from your personal issues and the running of a business to determining that this pursuit of soul and who I am became your essence. It's what you did for a career. You moved out of the family business and into this pursuit, and for that, I admire you greatly. So much so I esteem to be you, and from time to time people are confused. I was using the room below. I come to church just to eliminate, and a fellow that I admire greatly was in the little area next to me, and of course we struck up a chat, but he mistakenly said, "Well, good morning, Duke," to me, and then gave himself a pat. So I'm trying to be you, and it was so nice to be encouraged to be that way. Let's go back to your question, because I've gotten askew.
Well, it's very difficult for you to be me since you're so much older. Perhaps as I grow older, I could be you.
Let's leave that there. But anyway, this essential question, this "who am I" question, is, I love Mark Twain's quip: the two most important days of our life are the day we are born and the day we figure out why. So we're in this business of trying to figure out why, living for the sake of trying to be reminded of our truth, probably our spiritual essence. What's interesting about your opening comment that, animals frankly live only in the present moment. We have the capacity to think back and forward, and I dare say that sometimes we do so, reliving our past or perhaps engendering the fears of our past. And as we do that, we skip right over the present moment and into a future made of that past or of that mindset. And perhaps the animal kingdom and all of nature is not afflicted with that same structure. And the human challenge is to overcome the notion that we both came from or carry into this existence some past. But we all know from many a lecture here that living in the present is the key to this life. And in that present, we have an opportunity to be reminded of our truth, the very spiritual essence from which we were created. And it is in knowing that truth, or feeling it, or having those glimpses of that spiritual essence, that we are one in the present moment, and that's the only way that can happen. But secondly, we're mindful then that we're so much more than we make ourselves out to be in some of our waking moments and the other hours of our days. And so our challenge is to recognize that spirit and learn how to not equivocate. In other words, to fall back into knowing or thinking we're less than that very truth. And it may be that all of nature has the gift and the benefit of that and is acting as a mirror to us, but sometimes we fail to recognize in that mirror that very truth. And that is our challenge, and that is in knowing oneself more deeply, is in living in that present moment and seeing that mirror and believing it and living from it. So I try.
Thank you for your words. Thank you, Duke. So I have cancer, and when I was diagnosed with cancer, I had over 40 private students. I had my job here, and I had the Kansas City Chorale and singing jazz, and it was just very busy. And then all of a sudden, everything that was my life was in a bowl, and somebody just dumped it out all on the floor, and it was all brand new and also gone, kind of. And so since that time, I've had a lot of health challenges. I've spent a lot of hours laying in bed watching shows on my phone. And so in that context, you can become very disillusioned and think that you are cancer and think that you are somebody who lays in bed and watches shows, and that's your life. And so it's been a really big challenge to me to kind of defeat that thinking for my own well-being and decide that that's not who I am, that I am a singer, that I'm a lover, I'm a friend, I'm somebody that is willed to help and to lead. And I take you're speaking of the importance of the present, and when you have chronic illness, it can be very difficult to live in the present because sometimes you don't feel good. But the more you think about it, going through that process, at least in my experience, I find that generally speaking, 90 to 95% of my time, I feel pretty good. And I'm doing things that I like to do. I'm spending time with my friends. I'm making music. I'm reading and learning and just trying to enjoy the time that I have. And I find that, I find that most of the time I'm very happy. And I also realize too that I'm definitely better off than like billions of other people in the world. And I would venture to say that's true for almost all of us in this room right now, to be grateful for what you have and the life that you live is so important, because then you can move forward through that gratefulness, through that love, through that essence of humanity and its beauty. And then you make decisions about how you spend your time and what you do with your life and the people that you surround yourself with. And those decisions can become very easy. That's one thing that cancer diagnosis really taught me, is that now I know when I want to do things and when I don't want to do things. And it's very easy for me to make that choice to do the things that are valuable to me as opposed to things that are not. And to surround myself with people that are valuable to me as opposed to those that are not. So as far as who I am a musician. That's who I am. It's almost a religion in a sense, because it's an endless pursuit of study and fulfillment. And I feel very lucky to be that.
Tom, I've known you for over 20 years. You're really an outstanding psychologist, and I'm sure you've helped many people along the way try to find their self-identity that is true and that is as positive a nature to it. What do you think is the biggest problem that stands before most of us in really discovering who we are and expressing that freely?
Excuse me. I think there's a sundry of things. I believe that childhood is kind of like the air we breathe. And if we're in a house and someone's smoking cigarettes, we breathe in the secondary smoke. But I also believe if we're in a house and there's perfection and control and negativity and even stilted joy and toxic religions and such, I think we breathe that in too. And so I think we're a combination of many selves. And I always say that we have a public self and a private self, and we don't know a person outside their hut. And to me, I think it's, what's once external becomes internal. Other people's external points of view about you become your internal makeup. And it's very, very important that we check the validity of the people who are experts on everybody else but themselves. Mm-hmm. And I know if my mom was here, bless her heart, she'd let every one of you know how to conduct your life. But I have her number if you all like a little advice. But I think that when you ask who I am, the first thing that pops to my mind, the most important role is a father. I have 3 kids, and that just means the world to me. But I think we also, and I know I have, lived in different polarities. I've lived over here and I've lived over here. I tell the story that I've lectured in Germany, Ethiopia, and Italy, and I've also sat in a prison cell for a marijuana conviction. I've run really fast and raced on a national level, and then at a point in my life, I couldn't straighten my leg due to a surgery for 9 months. I've, cried at the most poignant moments of my life with people and patients, and I've laughed hysterically over my own absurdity. So, I think that I'm a combination of so many things. As a therapist, I always tell myself I can't take people places I've never been, because I think people are smart enough and astute enough to know if you're sincere and you know what you're talking about, or if you just need 4 more sessions for a deck for your lake house. And I don't have a lake house. But I think that the better we feel about ourselves, the more we show. And I know it's very easy to do a lot of impression management. And I will tell people, in my office, I'll say, you know how you are, and most people know how you are and how we present ourselves, but you also know how you really are. And that's usually someone's external point of view about your internal makeup. And what I like to do is get myself and people to the places of how they really, really are before all this stuff was learned and deposited in us and instilled in our neural networks and entrenched in ways that sort of steer our mind instead of we steering our own mind. So I don't even know what you asked, except I'm a therapist, I'm a dad, I'm a mate, and I'm very fortunate to be alive today. I woke up, 4,700 people a day die in the United States, and none of us did. We did it. We have another shot. And I think that's kind of what I embrace every day. And I listened to Sandra talk the other day, and I took one of her lessons on how to live knowing you're going to die back to my office and shared it with a couple of people. And one of the most poignant things she said to me, or said to us, was just think of something that you do every day, whether it's brush your teeth, feed the cats, put on your socks, scrape a windshield, put the carton back, the lid back on the milk carton, and think of never being able to do that again because we poof, we're gone. Mm-hmm. And so it really made me slow down and embrace everything. And I know we have a tendency to value ourselves to the degree we've been valued. Well, that was then, this is now. It's time for me to value myself to the degree in which I believe deeply based on, based on that window right up there. Mm-hmm. So that's that.
You can keep that for a second. We're going to give it back to Linda. Yeah, they say that there's 4 different selves that are in constant play, and the first one was what you said. It's who I think I am, and the second one is who other people think I am. The third one is who I think other people think I am. And there can be a huge difference there. But then the last one is the true self. Beneath it all, beneath all that layering of psychological clothing, and there is the spirited soul that is yearning to grow forth and evolve and become all that it can be. And yet we smother it with suppression and repression because we're afraid of what somebody else might think, or we're afraid of being rejected, or we're afraid of being wrong, or something like that. Instead of being like the young child that just steps out and just is. So, Linda, going back to you, the second question was, what do I love? And one of the lessons a couple of weeks ago, we distinguished between love and like. And I made the statement that it's okay not to like certain things. It's okay not to like people, but we have to love everything. If we love God, which is it all, we have to love it all in order to be in harmony with all of nature. And that might seem like it's hard to do, but we can do it through kindness. Every one of us can be kind to even the most unruly person. We can do it with compassion. We can do it with, anybody else remember the other two? Nobody? Ace, come on. It was compassion. It was empathy. Empathy was a huge one. Inclusiveness. Making sure that this kindness and this compassion that you have doesn't exclude anybody. Sometimes we have to keep people at a distance, so that their influence, their negative influence doesn't hurt us, but we can still love them from afar. So, Linda, could you expound on that?
I wanted to go back to your question or your comment about who do I think I am and what do other people think I am and what do I want to believe I am. I think it's real important for me to not be so hung up on what others think of me, because living my life, over half of my life, trying to meet up to that measure of what other people thought I should do, put me in a place that I don't want to be today. But the question, to expand further on that, I think of a situation. I'm a chaplain, and I was in the hospital, and it was around Christmas time, and I remember taking my basket, and I I was going to go to each patient's room and give them a hand massage. And I remember walking into the room, and the gentleman is in a wheelchair, and I go to, offer if he wants a hand massage, and he nodded yes. And I go to do this massage, and he has no fingers. I remember massaging his hand and him saying, I have never had anyone touch me that way. That in itself was something that made me realize how much people lack something in their lives, and we don't even know that we might just have a little small something to brighten someone's day. So for me, it's important, if nothing else in a day, that I could just smile. I never know. I know it's important to ask people if they want a hug, because a lot of people, and myself included sometimes, I'm not always open to people hugging on me, but just the thought that to hug someone, that someone would maybe live alone and never get any interaction with other people, how much that would mean to them. So I just think it's real important that for me, it's what I think I am, no matter what that is, but again, still coming back to that word tender, being tender with myself, and being able to lay my head down at night and say, is there something that I could have done a little bit differently today, maybe tomorrow, if that didn't happen? Thanks.
Ace, I might ask you, what is it that stands before us and prevents us from being kind and compassionate, empathetic, and inclusive to other people, no matter how unlovable they might be? Why can't we have the compassion to love them for the station that they're in life and feel a true source of brotherly love or agape love towards them?
Well, first we can do that. But what keeps us from doing that, I'm not completely sure. I consider that to be the human condition. And wouldn't it be cool if we could remember our past lives? In other words, if they were at our conscious level. And so we could take from the learnings of our past and somehow bring them into this life and then project the learnings onto moving on. It's hard to know, but we each come into this existence with whatever trace of memory and or history from our spiritual imprint that we're working on. There were 3 travelers who looked down in the valley only to see this glowing city of love and light and radiance, perhaps nirvana. And they were awestruck from afar. And one sat on the hillside and just contemplated, while the other 2 went down. And one of the 3 travelers looked into and over the wall surrounding this beautiful lit city of love and immediately was enraptured and fell over, jumped over to the other side to be there full time. The other, sitting on the wall, contemplating the beauty of what he experienced, retreated. But in his retreat, he went back and hiked back from whence he came to foretell that and extend that message of love to everyone that he came in contact with, and did his best here to live from that place. So each of the 3 chose a different path from the light as they saw it, the love as they felt it. And why I say it would be cool if we could both go back and somehow even consider a future of our continued development, our spiritual development, is that perhaps there's something about those lessons that would enlighten us while we are here. I think they're there, those lessons. I think from time to time we get snippets of those lessons. I do think the goal is to live in that place of enlightenment and love when we recognize it and sense it. But why we drift, why we're built, and you 2 gentlemen were talking about kind of the multiple layers of being looked at in life. And while that makes sense, there really are but two, because the overarching one is that of our truth and who we truly are. And the others are the distractions that we run into in life. And I don't know why that occurs, but it is to me the human condition. Now, how do we spring out of that? And I would say that there are symbols for our springing forth from that. I find the symbols of this sanctuary most interesting. It's a simple building. It's not full of ornate architecture and statuary and whatnot. But in its simplicity, you see a resounding impression of the number 7. And for whatever reason, that number has hit me some 10 years ago and stuck with me. And 7's a magical number. But if you'll notice behind us, we have 7 candles lit. And they are the 7 lights of remembrance of who we truly are. We have 7 layers of this wood paneling. You see this grain that encircles the back presidium? That is 7 levels of interesting wood shapes to remind us. You see the grate at the bottom of these openings? There are 7 in halves, 6 plus the 2 halves. Do you see the columns? There are 7 across each row. Do you see the vents around the perimeter of the columns? There are 7. Do you see the dangling things inside of the upper levels? There are 7 across each row. And do you see some say the center was a acknowledgement of the 7 chakras, the 7th at the top, exploding forth into us, looking down on that valley and seeing the city of love and knowing we deserve it. We are of that city. And these symbols remind me when I come here, as well as the good talks that are provided, that there is this inner truth. And if there are but 2 paths, it is the one path that I want to be totally committed to. And I'm growing in confidence that that's possible. I'm not perfect, but that's possible. And that's a wonderful feeling of hope.
Mm-hmm. Let me ask you this. This week, the second biggest Protestant denomination came out with a ruling that I thought was really archaic in this day and age, and to not give full and equal rights to the gay community. And we also find that in many places for the black community. And right speaking as well for other distinct characteristics of people that aren't of the majority. Mm-hmm. But how, in this day and age, can we look at anybody with the idea that they are less than me, or that they do not deserve what I've got? What is behind that in your thinking?
I think that has to do kind of with how we have evolved as humans somewhat, and that there is some kind of nugget inside of us that is somewhat adverse to change and adverse to difference. And through like survival, we found it more beneficial to only interact with people that are like us, that understand us, that know us, and all of that. And I think also it comes from a place of learning and how you've been brought up and what you've been exposed to and how it's been communicated to you, the differences in humanity and what they might mean to you and your set of values, your family, and that culture that you're a part of. But I think where you were going and what I think is really important is to, if you have those kind of innate, negative, apprehensive, fearful ideas or even just feelings, physical feelings, it's very important to try to make a conscious effort to turn that over and find love, right? So to make it a purposeful act as something that you practice. Anytime that you feel that uncomfortable feeling, maybe imagining that you yourself, your soul, your spirit is in that person. And so everything they're saying to you is something that you probably would also say. And if that's not true, then there is a force that is even greater than that, and that is radical love. And that's kind of a stubborn, willful love that will not allow yourself to hate or to engage in fear, and to accept the person for who they are and to acknowledge their difficulties, their struggle. I would guess that 9 times out of 10, when I find it difficult to be around someone, when I feel like I don't like that person, because they're different from me in some way, obviously, right? And I find that I think I just lost my train of thought. Chemo brain, sorry. But yeah, radical love is really, I think, the force that will move us into the future toward a more egalitarian society where people of difference are not persecuted, where they are recognized for their gifts and their own humanity and their own love that they have to share back out to the world. And coming across with people that are difficult to be around is just a challenge to me. It's a challenge to find the love that I can provide, that I have, that the understanding that person needs. There's all these stories of like African American man befriending Ku Klux Klan members to the extent that they left the Klan. Or you have examples of, Dr. King was a real proponent of radical love in his own way, and finding inspiration in those leaders that we've had in our history of moving things forward progressively and nonviolently, and being an active participant in that, even though you might not feel like that's your job. I would say it's everybody's job.
Thank you.
Can I say one thing first? If I wasn't OCD, I sure the hell am now, Ace. Do you know there's 7 squares across there in the back? Now I'm counting everything because of you. And, so anyway, yeah, go ahead.
Okay. This is for you and you alone, Tom. Each of us has special talents and we have special gifts, and we have a very unique personality that is a gift to the world if it is channeled through the proper measures of love, peace, harmony. What would you tell us, everybody in this room, that could be a common gift that each of us has, a single gift to give to the world, whether it be love or peace or harmony, and what are the obstacles that stand in our way of doing that?
It's interesting. I've always felt what is the most private to me is the most common to everybody. I think we all pretty much want the same thing: love, security, connections. There was a book written a few years ago called The Happiness Hypothesis, and this guy studied happiness for 25 years on a grant, which I thought, what a deal. And he distilled out of 25 years of study the 2 most important things for happiness. And the first was reciprocity, being able to give and graciously give as well as receive, as opposed to, oh no, I don't need anything. And I think that, that you have to be able to give and receive to be able to have a connection. I mean, you can't be intimate with someone unless there's a sense of equality. And when you reciprocate, there's this wonderful sense of equality. The second thing is connection, and whether it's, a church, a family, a job, a bowling league, anything, feeling sort of a connection. So I think it was interesting you were talking about, I don't know what you're talking about, but the thought that came through me when we were talking about the differences of people. I remember growing up, and we would go to my grandparents' house for Thanksgiving and Christmas dinners. And my cousins and we'd all assemble, and we'd all be so excited to see each other, and we'd play and run around and up and down the stairs and through the basement and all. And, the older we got, the more we started noticing differences. That there's a big political divide in my family. It's a self-righteous, I'm right, so that therefore you're a wrong type of aholics. And then there's the ones that, that are very sort of balanced and in the middle. And then there's ones that are kind of extreme on another side. And I just always, the older we got, the more the division. and the more we witnessed it. And I just dreamed for the day when back to the day when I didn't notice the differences. You know, when I didn't notice that my cousin I used to love to play with is a hardcore Trumper. I mean, not that there's anything wrong with that, whatever. But, I mean, my dad used to say, just because they don't vote like us does not mean they're not a good person. And I scratched my head on that thinking, really? You know, but that's true. But it's really hard for me to sort of embrace people that don't embrace the common humanity of everybody. I mean, I can pray for them and say, good luck. But when you talk about how do we love people, I mean, I'm working on that, pal. And because I think that what I see is such a division, such a hostile division, that if one side is always right, that makes the other side always wrong. And I've never seen a side that is always right, and I've never seen a side that's always wrong. And I see that in my office quite a bit, that the polarities of some of the people that come in and say, well, I don't need any help. And then there's the other side that nobody can help me. I mean, the idea is, Aristotle said that golden mean in the middle. I mean, we all need a little help. I always say, never go to a therapist that never goes to a therapist. I wouldn't trust them. So, I kind of always say, I don't want to be a fact finder or a pill dispenser. I want to be a feeling releaser. And I think that really when it comes down to everything, when you take all the gender and sexual identities and political stuff away, we're all pretty much the same. And I think that's what I embrace and try and embrace in people, and really what I miss from some of my own visions of looking out and evaluating the world from and sometimes a pretty skewed point of view, but I try and find that middle ground. Mm-hmm. So,
I think when it comes to our interaction with the world around us and all the people that pass through our lives, the golden rule really says it the best, and that's found in all of the ancient religious books, is just treat people the way you want to be treated. Even if they're in your face and they're yelling and they're shouting, you can recognize that's a pain there. We've all been there at one time. It doesn't feel good, it hurts. Just treat people kind, compassionate, empathize with them, and include them in your prayers and your blessings. Well, you did a great job. Can we have a round of applause for our people? Thank you very much.